joining us. I'm posting the watch party link again. You're going to want to go there. You're going to want to enter your name in the box. You're going to want to join us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Cooper. And once again, I'm happy to welcome Josh Larson as host of the Ebert Interruptus. Josh is the co-host of the radio show and podcast Film Spotting, the author of the book Movies Are Prayers, and editor-producer for Think Christian, a website and podcast exploring faith and pop culture. He's been writing and speaking about movies professionally since 1994. You can see more of his bio and links in the Zoom chat or linked on the CWA website. And Josh, welcome once again for day 2.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you guys all back here. Thanks to Jamie and Cooper, all the preparation they have done and the work that Cooper is doing tonight. It worked out really well last night. So I think we have a good way to do this virtually. I'm sorry we had to stop the party in the middle, really at the highlight last night. Felt bad to do that, but that is sort of the nature of Interruptus. So we're going to jump right back in where we left off last night, and then hopefully make it through to the end of the film. Before we do that, though, to kind of get us in the participatory conversational flow of Interruptus, I want to give a little space, just a couple minutes here for a few of you. If you had any thoughts that came to mind after we finished the film, maybe some questions or things that popped into your mind today as the movie was lingering for you, maybe we can spend a minute or two talking that over. I know Jamie mentioned that something came to mind for him. So we'll start with Jamie, hear his thoughts, and then get to a couple of you before we launch back into the film. What do you got for us, Jamie?
Thanks, Josh. I just want to disagree with some of the reviews I've read that claim that this is a film with no plot. Just because it has a lot of dancing and very little dialogue doesn't mean it doesn't have a plot. I say it has a plot and multiple subplots. To me, Marta has a hero's journey. And the film overall reminds me somewhat of other music-based boy meets girl subculture films like American Graffiti and Saturday Night Fever. So what do you guys think?
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, you're disagreeing with me. I mean, that is allowed. Interrupt us, but I did talk about this being an ensemble piece, right, at the beginning, and we also did touch on last night some of the mini dramas, is how I described them, that were playing out. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both, I think. But let's get to some of the people. I see some raised hands.
Yeah, okay. We'll start here with Carrie and Nancy. Carrie and Nancy, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, this is actually Carrie. I wanted to point out that there is another film called Lovers Rock. Actually, I think it's called The Story of Lovers Rock. But if you're looking on Amazon, you'll see a bold banner that says Lovers Rock. And we actually ended up watching that one. And so when we tuned into you last night on the YouTube channel, Nancy and I are looking at each other going, what the hell are they talking about? Did they see the same movie we did? But this film is worth checking out because it's a documentary that's basically a history of this style of music, and that Lovers Rock was a record label, and it goes through a lot of these people like Janet Kay, who's featured vocally in this film. So if you want to find out more about the music, check out this one that was made in 2012.
Great. Thank you for that, Harry. Glad you found us tonight.
Me too.
All right, Joshua Youngerman, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, one of the things that I thought of was just how, thinking today as I was sort of walking outside before this, just how important music has been in Steve McQueen's career and filmography. Like not only like the great scene in Shame, but really Shame comes to mind. Obviously the lounge scene with Carey Mulligan, but also just how like eclectic that soundtrack is. It's really one of my favorite soundtracks. It's like Glenn Gould, the Talking Heads, all this great music, and how important that is, and how he's sort of been working his way up to sort of almost making a musical. And also I want to say, if people are interested in this time period, a movie called Babylon, which might be hard to find, but if you can, it's very much about sort of the I guess this scene in the 80s. So I think the composer, the guy who plays Milton, I think in this movie is was the composer of Babylon. So
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, another film in this anthology, in McQueen's Small Axe anthology, Alex Wheatle, actually is even more steep. Well, it's hard to say it's more steeped in reggae because this is wall-to-wall music, but it talks about how reggae was such an important part of that character's life. Actually, a real-life novelist, Alex Wheatle. So a through line, music is a through line, as you're saying, through McQueen's films and absolutely through this whole anthology.
John Metz, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just struck a little bit. We were talking about color last night, and just having the sort of perceived bad guy who's coming up always wearing kind of the lightest colors reminds me of sort of the very generic stormtrooper kind of white armor. And I just remember being struck as a kid that was kind of backwards, that the black was always supposed to be sort of bad, the white was supposed to be good. But I was curious about other people's kind of perception of that. He obviously stands out nicely, so you can track him in all the shots with the lower lights and all the other darker colors, but whether that symbolism kind of strikes with other people as well.
Yeah, thank you. The costuming so key, as we discussed last night throughout this film.
Ross Bratton, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Howdy. I know we talked, I remember like a comment from last night about kind of the Red Riding Hood aspect to this. And I think that Silly Games sequence also has such an interesting thing of it is the woman in red. You have like the big bad wolf kind of stalking her. And we as the audience know from what we've seen, but also you kind of watch as it's going on going, something's off with this guy. And you should probably move away from this individual as quickly as possible. And it is that kind of, it's find it interesting with the costume, with all this, but she is in red. You have this kind of predatory, person there. And eventually what happens, and it does seem to kind of put all of that together in that scene.
Yeah, and if you are in the watch party right now, I believe it should end or work this way. We're actually looking at that character, Cynthia, in the red dress. That's pretty much where we're going to start here. But I think we might have one more comment we'll get to, and then we'll jump back in.
Okay, Mitchell, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up quickly on Joshua Youngerman's recommendation for Babylon, which I would second as a recommendation. It's a fantastic movie. And also just wanted to mention that it's streaming right now on Criterion Channel, if anybody was curious about that movie.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to jump in where we left off pretty much. I'm going to back up a little bit so that we can experience the entire Silly Game sequence. So let's let it play through, since we did stop it a few times and talk about it last night. Let's let it play through all the way, and I'll pause it after this sequence, and then we can maybe start with our interrupting from there. Now, a question, Jamie, perhaps for you or Cooper. I'm just looking at how many people we have in the watch party, and it's less than we have on this Zoom, but that's not an issue. We should just go ahead and start.
Cooper, what do you think?
I think I've only had one individual so far email me or message me that they've been having trouble joining. I'm happy to field some questions and try to help you troubleshoot as we go along. Please message me, CWA. But I think we probably want to get on going.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. And yes, if you are in the Zoom looking for a way to join the Amazon Watch Party, Cooper is putting that link to do that right in the chat. So it is right there for you. Let's get back into Lovers Rock. See, you can't interrupt that. I just won't do it. Um, you can put songs on repeat. That is a scene that would be nice to put on repeat. That's how I want to do it. Just a quick thing I want to share, and I see a hand up already, but that moment was not in the script to continue the a cappella section after the song fades. Certainly not to continue it that long. And I want to go back to that Vulture interview with director Steve McQueen that was done with Hunter Harris that I referenced last night. Harris says that McQueen compared the movement of this scene to whirling dervishes. They spin to get closer to God, he said. And then this is Hunter Harris writing. In Lover's Rock, he could spin and spin and spin his characters and watch how Black people in a Black home had fellowship. Basically, here you spin them and then you step back and see what can occur, as McQueen said, because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not interested in what happens. I'm interested in what occurs. That's different. So this is Hunter Harris again. The silly games moment would have happened whether or not he was there, whether or not the camera was there. It was a moment that couldn't be scripted or planned. As an artist, you can never even hope for it, McQueen said. You never even think of it. But the idea of being invited to that situation is what you kind of hope for. So I will drop this interview again in the chat. And one more note quickly here before we get to the hands raised. Did you notice Dennis Bavell, the writer of Silly Games there, the older man in this scene? That's where he gets his other cameo. But yeah, I'd love to hear from some of you.
Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Hello. Woo, that is a scene. We just sat here silently and watched that, and it's wonderful. Something I really like to notice this time around with it is how you convey texture in a scene like this. You have, obviously all these people here, and it's very sensual. How do you kind of communicate that beyond just the dance moves? I love seeing like the water on the wall, so it's basically sweat on the wall, but it's just such a, I imagine it's probably a warm room, but just the way the camera flows around the whole scene obviously is just so, it's so welcoming but also intimate. And then you do have these kind of other establishing shots of just how the vibe is from there. So I really, the cinematography is obviously spectacular in this film, but those little details that we've talked about yesterday as well just really add to, how to get across the emotion and vibe of the scene.
Well, the choice is when to move in on a certain couple or even a single dancer, and when to back up, as you said, and take in the whole room. That's improvisation in a sequence like that to get that rhythm.
Okay, Ross Bratton.
I was wondering who the baritone was, and that was my first thing, is it was like, now that makes sense. I find it so interesting at the end of this song, and at the end of the sequence, that it clearly goes beyond that, and then it goes from being beautiful to kind of haunting, as you're seeing Cynthia and this individual now walking towards the back, and we as the audience, maybe if you watch it now, know what's about to happen, but it turns now into a much darker, sinister, kind of concerning kind of version of this song. That's kind of a very interesting transition out of that such euphoric scene to now this possible danger.
Yeah, the drop in the vocal register certainly can give that impression. What I love about it also is that it becomes its own living thing. It's clearly the same song, but the people there in that room in that moment are making it completely unique at the same time. And the shifting of the register is part of that.
Christopher Lights, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hey, love that scene. Appreciated it last night and tonight. I wanted to talk about this. I think it's called sound design. The distinct footfalls of the dancers. I mean, it just landed with me. For me, it developed a real sense of like almost like a people and a place and a culture in unison. There was this huge community shared thing. But I was curious what the director or others thought about that.
I haven't come across a comment specifically about that, but just experiencing it, it's obviously communal. Everyone is doing it, but it also provides, it's sort of conducting them, right? They're all conducting each other keeping each other in rhythm with the singing, because the music has gone away. And so something is needed to do that. So it serves that purpose, as well as we've mentioned how many tactile details there are in this film. And that is an audible tactile detail. When you hear those, the feet coming down on the floor, it puts you right there in that room even more than, if it didn't have that.
Celeste, go ahead and unmute.
You just mentioned it, Josh. What I was so aware of is that the DJ is gone and the people have taken over. I mean, but in such a sweeping, overwhelming way. And you can see the DJ in the back smiling at them like, okay, you can have it now. I'm going to watch you, instead of, yesterday we were talking about how much he's advertising himself every couple of minutes. And he just seems so pleased with kind of almost taking credit for what he's generated with the dancers and the singers just enveloping us with their songs. And the women are the ones who really carry the music. The women do. I don't see any men singing at all.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do hear Dennis Bovell in his cameo. He does have that baritone, but you're right. They are leading this chorus. And great observation about the DJs too. It's like that, recognizing this is the moment. We're here to lead, we're here to conduct, but this is the moment we're going to step back.
Joshua, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just wanted to pick up again on what people are saying about the DJ stepping back. Because I really I love it. Speaks to the improvisatory nature of that scene. That the music just continues, them singing. You don't hear the song actually playing, and it feels like any party you've been to where you get so lost in a song that you just continue singing even after the song has stopped. And also Dennis Bovell is the one who composed the score to Babylon too. So just a further plug for Babylon.
The improvisational nature, I think you can catch. I'm not going to rewind it, but I think you can catch the woman in the turquoise shirt near the end there. The song starts to trail off and she kind of looks over her shoulder. I think someone shouts in the back of the room and she sort of looks over her shoulder, and you get a sense where she's kind of asking, are we going to keep going? She's kind of looking for someone to give the direction, because this wasn't planned. So are we going to keep going? Are we ending here? And she just kind of laughs too. Maybe I'll try to find that as we hear the next.
Mitchell, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit kind of on what Aaron was talking about how the scene also adds texture to it while you're watching it. And I feel like McQueen does a really good job of giving us these character beats in it too, particularly in sort of the juxtaposition between the two main couples that we focus on, which gets a little bit into the gender role idea that we were talking about yesterday too, where we're focusing at first on Franklin and Martha dancing together. And the camera really lingers on Martha kind of asserting dominance almost in the way that they're dancing together. And the camera's lingering on her, kind of moving her leg on his groin there. And then it transitions to Cynthia dancing, whereas her position, she's kind of pinned up against the wall there. And it kind of does, like Ross was talking about, leads into that haunting idea of where we kind of know now where it's going to go next.
Yeah, and compare, I'm glad you mentioned where they're positioned in the room in this, they're in the center of the dance floor, Martha and Franklin are, and notice as we get further along in this sequence, where they find some privacy compared to where Cynthia is taken by Bammy. Let me play this moment and then we'll get to you, Andrea, just see if that moment I was talking about, we can capture this here. Yeah, that right there. I just love how she looks over her shoulder at the sound she heard, but also kind of, you get a sense, how long are we going to keep doing this? Let's go to our last comment I think we have here.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
I had just watched the film before this session came on, and I noticed that there seemed to be three of these kind of communal sequences where the whole group sort of gets together in like the anticipation of the joy of what they're doing together. And the first time is the kung fu fighting. And it seems like at that point early in the dance, the floor is filled with mostly women, and the women are dancing with each other and they do the kung fu fighting thing. And then this is like the couples. And then at the very end of the movie, it's a very heavily male group. And I just thought that was interesting how it could kind of progresses through the evening in these three different kinds of energy.
Different energy, different music for each one. Yeah, we'll see that soon. I think we have a few more people.
Yeah, Chris Allen, go ahead.
I just want to say thanks to Josh. This is why I watch Cinemas Interruptus or Ebert Interruptus. When I watched this movie a couple months ago, I got really bored in this scene. And in fact, I remember saying to myself, come on, Queen, let's get on with it. Okay, yeah, I got it. Now, the comment you made yesterday about the camera almost being a character, the sound taking you over, the hazy look and the dull lighting, the touch between people, I get it. I get it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad we're adding to your experience. That's what we're here for. Okay, great stuff. We could probably do an entire interruptus on that sequence, but let's go ahead and get back to the rest of the film here.
Go ahead,
I
Aaron.
think we have Aaron. Yep.
Hey, I'm curious if you have some thoughts on this, Josh. Where do you think McQueen's draw? I mean, obviously it's his own film and he's drawing off actual experiences, but in terms of like filmmaking and influences, do you have any like thing in mind as far as what he's drawing from past work? I mean, just the amount of time we're spent on just the camera flowing through a scene, observing a
Yeah.
party. There's obviously like there's some 70s and like new wave options I can think of or what have you, but any other key influences you see in all this?
Yeah, I haven't seen in the interviews I read any citations he's made, but describing it as a hangout movie brings to mind some of the films of Richard Linklater, even something like Dazed and Confused, which heavily involves music and weed as well, we can say. So that's one that jumps to mind, but I'd love to hear of the French New Wave titles you're thinking of or any others that people might have popped in people's heads.
Yeah, offhand, like there's like maybe some like Godard in there or like I don't know, there's like some key ones I'm like not like off the top of my head thinking of right now. I know there's some good, there's a vibe there that you watch too many Criterions, you start losing track of things.
Vibe is a good way to describe it. Yeah. And that's why titles don't come to mind, because it's a feeling that comes to mind, right? But I do see some other hands, so some other folks might have ideas.
Yeah, Ross, go ahead.
I was actually from earlier when I believe when Jamie made the comment about the kind of multiple things and it's not being plotless. I actually thought of Dazed and Confused also, because there's like the A plot of like Randall kind of, is he going to go on the football team, is he not, and then you have all these other plots here, and here it's Franklin Marta is kind of like the A plot, but there's all of these other things that are going on, and the camera kind of just finds this idea of if we just keep going along, we'll kind of see this stuff and then keep moving along, and something else will kind of, catch our eye as we keep going too.
Yeah, another good connection. Thanks.
Andrea? Try again, Andrea.
Hi. So I just got on a kick of watching John Sim movies, and he did a lot of British movies, I think, that were made for British TV. And a really famous one, apparently, among British youth of the club culture of the late 90s was something called Human Traffic, which a lot more white working class Brits, but I think he had a reggae friend who was a DJ but it's the same kind of very loose format, characters, but not a lot of plot, but kind of it was ecstasy fueled club evening. And just the experience really more. And of course, I grew up in the 70s, and some of the clothes and the music, and not all the music, but a lot of it. I remember a lot of this and the vibe of it. So it's great. I think more for the experience, really, right?
Yeah, thanks for the recommendation. Nice.
Sure.
Okay, Mitchell, go ahead.
Just on a influence kind of talk, I wanted to mention some movies that came to mind as reference points for me is kind of the Italian movies of the new wave era, like Il Sorpasso, La Dolce Vita, La Cleese, all have very extended music party scenes, especially kind of the end of La Dolce Vita. And then also, speaking of Linklater as well, a movie that immediately came to mind for me the first time I watched this was the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight trilogy, and just tracking the two characters over the course of one evening.
Yeah, I can see that. I'd definitely rather be at this party than the one at the end of La Dolce Vita, though. But yeah, absolutely. I see where you're going with that.
Daniel Packman, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just think this is a convenient spot where you stop, because we're seeing one couple doing something quite different than the previous one. The previous one we left off as she's saying, "Where are you taking me?" as they go off into the woods there. And here, although it starts out with them very much the same way, with him pinning her against the wall even, there's an obvious turnaround here where he is deferring to her now as she's ordering the drinks for them. It's just a totally different relationship, even though superficially it's similar.
No, I like that. It's all those little social gestures that that define how this relationship is progressing. And the moment you described about her being against the wall, that's what I was thinking of. They've found privacy to a degree. There's that speaker kind of creating this little nook for them, but they're still in the dance room. So they're still part of the community. She, you know, she's not taken away outside where she is all alone. So there's a distinction there. All right, we'll get back into it.
Stop. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey Josh, I had a question based on something that you said yesterday. You mentioned the silly game sequence kind of sticking in your mind and you thinking your memory of it being that it was much later at like in the movie. And I was wondering if you felt like that was because you kind of forgot the stuff that comes afterwards, or is it just one of those things where a sequence in a movie sticks out to you so much that that kind of holds in your memory of it afterwards more than anything else?
I think for me, it was a matter of where most of the films I've seen put the pinnacle of whether it's, you know, this isn't really a narrative pinnacle, the silly game sequence, but it certainly is an aesthetic one, I think, and also an emotional one. And so I associate those with coming at the climax of a movie, you know, narratively. And as we've been discussing, this does have many narratives in it, but maybe not one grand trajectory. So maybe it was just natural that McQueen didn't put it a little bit later in the film. Again, we talked about the improvisation. So maybe it wasn't meant to be this grand moment and it just became one. And so why move around your entire film to meet that? I don't think it's a fault that it happens at the midway point at all. I should probably be clear about that. But yeah, I think that's probably why I had that reaction.
Stop. This is Jamie. I just want to say that the editing of this sequence is different than a lot of the other movie where the camera just languidly travels through the scene. Here we have some very sharp cuts, and that drives the intensity of the scene.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It feels like a different movie outside of that, the dance room, doesn't it? Almost every other scene, even the ones that don't have aggression or confrontation like this. Maybe the camera in the kitchen at the very beginning, I'm thinking back, had that sort of easiness to it. And the editing as well was a little bit more laid back in the kitchen, but the other spaces get more of a conventional editing style like this. I just want to jump in here because someone else pointed out the use of the siren at another moment of alarm last night in the sound design out in the street in front, where it kind of heightened our senses to something going on. And it was just used in a similar way again here.
Stop. Go ahead, Aaron.
First thing, she threw the cigarette at his suit and almost ruining the pure whiteness of it, that's just pointing that out. We talk about the plotting of this film a lot so far or recently, and the lack of having a conventional kind of main story means that you can avoid a lot of cliches, and that's not to say that this is here, but what I do like is the clockwork nature of the plotting. If the cousin doesn't get into the party, she doesn't get mad and storm off outside, and therefore this takes a different turn. But instead, because of the things that have happened, Martha finds herself outside in a particular situation where she can intervene in what is once again the worst birthday party that seems to be happening right now.
Yeah, think about how much has happened, how this has progressed suddenly from being a hangout movie where we just sit back and observe to, bang, bang, confrontations. And this right here, suddenly things have escalated intensely. And also your comment about throwing the cigarette at his suit there, they've already had a conversation about how they both are stylists. She sews, he designs clothes. And so there's a personal, we know that now about both of them. And so there's a personal insult in addition to just the practical effect of getting his attention and getting him off of Cynthia.
Adam, go ahead.
It seems that we're sort of bringing up these cultural things, which we've talked about, yesterday, and that all of a sudden we're hearing about her, Marta, in the hallway with her cousin saying your father beat your mother and you just let it happen, or your mother let it happen until finally it was enough. And so it's sort of bringing up these cultural things that are happening at the time. And then here you see all of a sudden she's, as they're saying, thinking about it and saying, okay, it's my turn to now not let this stuff continue. So it's interesting how they sort of foreshadowed what was happening out there with the comment of abuse there. And then sort of related to that is something else we talked about, that safe space that everyone's dancing in. And I just keep seeing how it's getting smaller, like the room was small and compact, and the real world is slowly seeping in of outside there's violence, in the hallway there's violence, up in the bathroom where he tried to sneak in with Marta earlier, and now in the backyard. It's like that little safe space of the world is getting smaller and smaller, and the real world's creeping in, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, the bubble is shrinking. And you talked about her connecting her family's past, the violence she experienced in her family with what's happening here. If you aren't using the subtitles, you might have missed that there's actually argument low in the soundtrack, on the sound design, that is her memory of violence, domestic violence in her home. That is what she's thinking about. And we can actually hear it there in the sound design. And then it blends into Bammy, where he is assaulting Cynthia. We hear their voices as well. So a very subtle way of doing just what you were talking about, Adam, through the sound design.
Stop. Joshua, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I mean, this sequence and then the sequence at the door we just saw a few minutes ago, just the way that they have to do this. As someone who does teach de-escalation trainings, as part of like abolition work, even situations where we desperately want to call the cops, the de-escalation that she does here, it's almost a sense of survival for these characters. Like they can't call the cops even if they want to, in a situation where they probably would want to call the cops. And I'm sure that character doesn't want to have to do what she does. And I think just the way they sort of show these two scenarios and how they really have to that's their way of surviving is, I think is, I love that McQueen shows that. And I think it's very true to sort of life in a lot of ways.
Well, that's interesting too, because as we'll see, Bammy here, even after this incident, is not, he's not kicked out. And you wonder, it could be, as you're saying, that they are not in a position where they can expect help from the police to call the police over this. So they're going to try to police the situation themselves to a degree. And yet we'll see him lingering still around the back of the room as the movie goes on.
Aaron, go ahead.
The mention of de-escalation is perfect as far as how to get into what's going on here, because it's such a unique situation to be in as far as how do we keep the night going while dealing with a very severe situation. In addition, I'm all for seeing scenes of strong women taking care of themselves or what have you, but watching Franklin come up here, it's a talking again about that de-escalation, it's a really great moment as far as how do you avoid doing something that both you don't want to see as a viewer and as a filmmaker you want to avoid, as far as getting into like a fight and then like police do come and then all the generic things happen, as far as how to tell that story. Instead, it's exactly what we just saw, and I think it's very beneficial in that way, as far as how do we keep this night going and how do we keep presenting it in the way that we're going to. It knows how to avoid a lot of cliches in that manner, which I respect very much.
Well, I have to echo that, because if this were a television cop show, they would have relished making that into the fight, and they would have exploited that just because it's interesting for I don't know, it brings in advertising or something. This is much more true.
I think we have one other hand raised there.
Christopher, go ahead.
Christopher, yep.
So the two dangerous characters in the movie we've met a couple times now, Bammy and what is it, Clifton or CT. I'm wondering why Bammy is accepted and Clifton is not. like the bouncer seems to recognize Clifton as dangerous, yet Bammy is, we kind of see him as even the more darker predator. I'm wondering what is so dangerous about CT.
Yeah, let's revisit that because he gets his own moment coming up here, and I think that might be a good time to talk a little bit more about that.
Linnea, go ahead.
Hello. So I think that she does threaten to call the cops in her own way by threatening to call the doorman. And that's the thing that brings him, pulls him down, and he realizes that she can do it and that would have consequences. So she uses the tool that she has at hand, the doorman, as a threat.
Yeah, which goes back to the idea of self-policing, because they can't depend on the police, can't rely on the police, which it should be noted the first installment in Small Axe, Mangrove, very precisely set up by revisiting a situation of police abuse in the 60s. So this is something, if you're watching this movie or this series, one after the other, is very fresh in your minds, and you would understand why that is the reality here. I was going to see if we can go back, just the Clifton question I'm thinking about, to the very beginning, just briefly here, when he tries to get in, just so we have this right. And I see, Gloria, you have your hand raised. We'll get to you. Let me revisit this moment briefly here, just so we have things right. Hang on. Okay, so it's not immediately clear what the confrontation is here. I know someone has chatted me, Chris Allen. I assume that he simply refused to pay the cover charge. That could be, we saw him, first time we see him, he's trying to steal the money from the phone booth so that he can afford to get in. So maybe he didn't have enough and he's just trying to get in. But I also want to see, speaking to the police question, this is something I've looked at myself a couple of times. If this is a police car that comes by in the back, or just another vehicle or a taxi or something, that causes Jabba the bouncer to pull him inside and shut the door. And again, we were just talking about this. Police themselves, keep the business in the house. Let's see a few more seconds of this. Yeah, again, not immediately clear. Even the sound in the background could be the DJ siren, or maybe that was a law enforcement vehicle with its siren going down. But all stuff to keep in mind when we revisit the Clifton question. But let's jump back to Gloria now for a minute.
Go ahead, Gloria.
Well, I can tell you it wasn't a police siren. I live in London. There was no London police siren there. To the question about why CT was possibly treated differently, he shows up in an altercation. He doesn't just walk up nicely, pay his money, walk in. So it starts off not smooth, and the bouncer obviously is looking for smooth. He's also not dressed as smartly as the other guy. And the other guy is very gentlemanly. He's very proper. He's very quiet. Okay, he's getting on, behind the scenes, not being very gentlemanly. Whereas CT is outwardly not very gentlemanly, which is not what the bouncer or anybody else is looking for at the party.
Yeah, Bammy is way more the serpent in the garden that they're trying to create here. So, Gloria, you should be our expert, it sounds like. So, by all means, let us know when we've got things wrong or assuming things incorrectly that you might know differently.
Mitchell, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on what Gloria was saying there about kind of the difference between Bammy and Clifton. And that's what comes to mind immediately for me, is there being that class difference between the two of them and the way that they are presented within this community, which also taps into that idea of that we've kind of talked about multiple times of this is a safe space for them where they're separated from the hierarchy of race, but they're not separated from that hierarchy of class. And that still bleeds into it, regardless of the fact that it is a safe space generally.
Yeah, back to the idea, safe space, but not a utopia by any means.
Andrea, go ahead.
I think just to follow on what Gloria said, it seems like Bammy is a more accomplished predator and Clifton has emotional problems that may be just more flashy and more obvious and just more disruptive. But what Bammy does, maybe he's just not been caught yet. So
I think that's right, and I think that might reveal itself in this moment that's coming up shortly here. So let's get to that.
Stop. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Just wanted to note quickly on the costuming again. Now we notice that Bammy, that white jacket's off and it's just the red shirt underneath. You know, he's much more threatening now outwardly.
Yeah, he's been unveiled in a way by Martha. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is probably a good place to talk about Clifton's dance here. Clifton, I think we mentioned yesterday, played by Kadar Williams Sterling. This is actually one of my favorite moments of the film. I love this dance. I love how the camera slowly backs away when his mini story is done, just out of the room, as we just saw. But what do we make of Clifton's wild dance? He definitely cramps the vibe, right? He's taking up way too much space. Everyone's kind of giving him a side eye. But to me, it's also the most liberating dance of the night in some ways. And this has been an evening of freedom. It feels like he's maybe the one who needs this bubble more than anybody that we've met. And he unburdens himself here. It's a whirling, it's a lurching routine, but it's also kind of beautiful in its bombastic way. And what I also love is how he's invited into the community too. I mean, there are those side eyes. Then they kind of see that, as someone said already, what, you know, he's dealing with some stuff. And he has not come here to pray like Bammy. He's come here for community, and they eventually offer that to him. Give him a smoke, hand him a mic. And then what happens? He's kind of brought in there as part of what they're trying to create. So I think this is a beautiful moment. But yeah, what do others make of it? What do others make of Clifton in general?
Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, that time it looked like it was like a cry for help. It was like, you know, see me, recognize me, acknowledge me. And after a while, somebody broke the silence and broke the wall and reached out to him. And that little welcoming glance was everything. It was like I felt the de-escalation immediately from that. Like, suddenly he was seen, suddenly he was affirmed for where he was.
Because it could have gone either way, right? It definitely could have leaned more towards some sort of confrontation. Mm-hmm.
Joshua?
Yeah, just like the idea that I think, you know, one of the things, if you're at one of these big parties, is just how even if sort of everything outside gets shoved away, and like just the idea that you lose yourself in the welcoming of the communal welcoming, I think you see that. And I think that sort of, yeah, that I love you mentioning the moment where they pass, you know, the smoke. Because to me, that's sort of the welcoming in, you know, of him.
Yeah. And I mean, think of the gesture of giving the mic, because I don't know that anyone else.
Yeah,
I may be wrong. I'm thinking back. I don't know if anyone else has been handed the mic yet this evening. It's very much a position of authority to hold the mic. You're directing the evening. And so to do that is an enormous invitation.
Yeah, it implies some interesting backstory that we're not privy to. Andrea?
Trying to figure out this unmute thing. I also think that the DJ is sort of a gatekeeper in his own right. He seems to read the room and kind of try to get the vibe in several different places to go in a good direction. And that's, I think, how he did it with Clifton, is to really relinquish his control for a little bit. So I thought that was an interesting insight into what his character does, the DJ.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, obviously a DJ's job is to direct the party, but here he's playing, you know, and the music does that, but really hands-on social director as well. I see another hand. I think is that you, Cooper?
That's me. I'm gonna jump in for a moment.
Yeah, please do.
The way Clifton is dancing to me really strikes me as skanking, which is a form of dance done to ska, which is a blend of reggae and punk from about the same era in London. And this to me really, I look at that as a social class, that it's a really different class style of dancing. And it strikes me as he's doing really the wrong dance for the party. And then I agree with everything there, that he gets brought in and he gets handed a smoke, and he either has a beef or he knows one of the DJs, that there's something there, and he either knows these guys or he's got old blood with them. And but it really strikes me there's a social class difference there as well.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. It could absolutely be part of it. And yeah, we don't know the backgrounds. I think one of the DJs calls out Martha earlier in the evening. So obviously some of these characters know each other from other walks of life. And so that could easily be. Also on the class point, which we brought up a few times, there's a class distinction, a little element where he steals Bammy's beer when Bammy puts it up on the speaker when this scene begins, and then Clifton comes around and grabs it and takes a swig and walks off with it. Two things going on there. It's possibly the class thing again. Clifton doesn't have the money to buy a beer, so if he's going to drink beer, this is how he's got to do it. And also, it's starting to shift where, okay, our sympathy is moving over. Not that we ever had sympathy for Bammy, but there was some discussion about these are two dangerous guys. They're presented as dangerous guys. Well, are they really, or is that our misperception? And a little moment like that, I think, shifts our sympathies to clearly we despise Bammy at this point. So to see Clifton pull one over on him, it brings us over to his side a little bit before we get this dancing moment.
Celeste, go ahead.
Going back before he even starts the dance, when he comes in, he wheels around in front of the guy. What is the name of the man in the white suit that takes his jacket off? Yes,
Bammy. Yep.
Yes, and Bammy is drinking a beer and puts it down on a chest behind him. And then you see the fellow kind of wandering around the room, and all of a sudden, Bammy has a bottle of beer in his hand. And right after that, Bammy looks to get his beer, and it's gone. And from that moment on, we forget about Bammy, and we're focused on the young guy, the cousin. And it was just sort of like, now I'm taking center stage, and it's like a message from the director, like, okay, we're going to put him in the background right now and focus on another character.
Yep. A way to transition from one character's mini drama to the next. Absolutely.
And it was a real put down when he can't find his beer. He looks around at everybody else, and
I enjoyed the double take he does there when he's looking for his beer.
Interesting, a message in the bottle. Okay, Anthony, go ahead.
One other thing that I noticed, and I didn't notice this before, is that Franklin whispers to someone, and I don't know what the significance of that is or who that character is, but was there something that I missed in that?
Someone can correct me if this is a misunderstanding, but I think that is Franklin's friend who we met earlier in the evening, and my sense is it was like a check-in, like, how are we doing? Are we hanging out? Are we sticking around? Remember, his friend was trying to talk to Patty, Martha's friend, who ended up leaving. So maybe he's been spending the night thinking, I'm just hanging out here. I want to go home. That was my sense, but maybe it was something else. I don't know. I see Ross might have a different take.
Yeah, Ross, go ahead.
I thought he was the person that then goes up to him and gives him the smoke. And then it might be that it's that he was saying, like, hey, look, this guy, maybe you should check in with him. He seems to be kind of something's off, and he has that obviously connection with Marta. I may be misremembering also who it was, like, in the sequencing, but it may be that it's the same person. And so it was like, hey, can you try to bring this guy into the fold maybe a little bit more? And then that's why, and you see him kind of put his arm around Marta after that conversation. So I'm wondering if maybe that's it.
Yeah, let's check that out. I think I can do this. Yeah, I think that might be a different guy. Looks like it, but yeah, I see Ross, your hand is still up. Did you want to add something to that?
I didn't know it was up. I thought it maybe was, but that I could be absolutely wrong. But yeah, it seems like, and then there's some conversation that he has with Marta whispering to her that it seemed like something. So yeah, I might just be wrong. But that's what at least when I initially watched it, that was what I like as we were watching through there. Because there was that kind of like weird cut in there. But I very much could be wrong.
You see a couple
Lenelia, did
other
you have a
hands.
comment?
Yeah, I wasn't the same guy that offers the joint, but when Clifton comes whirling around toward that speaker, he kind of invades the space of the guy in the striped shirt, and the guy in the striped shirt takes offense. He gives him a look like, and he walks over and talks to the other guy, and he kind of calms him down, and he's like, oh, okay, and he stands there against that wall. So he abandons his position at the speaker and lets this guy, because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's got problems.
Yeah, and if that is Franklin's friend, it could be like, this is the final straw for me. Let's go home. Maybe. So
yeah.
Andrea, go ahead and unmute.
Well, I just, again, it's kind of following on the previous comment. That whole sequence feels too like Franklin and Martha are watching it very keenly because they can see the two kind of antagonists of the evening for them. One, Martha obviously cares about her cousin, and they're just, it seems like Franklin is reassuring her, and they're just keeping an eye on the whole situation because it's kind of reaching a boil. And perhaps, Franklin de-escalates his friend too, because they just don't, if anything breaks out, her cousin's going to be involved. So anyway, I just had a feeling that they were really watching that situation themselves, and sort of from their end, there was some management of it going on as well, kind of. And anyway, that's what I have to say about that. So.
Yeah, I mean, Martha is fresh off a very traumatic, situation out in the backyard, and then, of course, the confrontation with her cousin, with Clifton too. All right, that is good. Some good stuff on Clifton in this moment. Maybe we'll jump into another narrative mini drama we've got.
We have a comment from Joshua.
Oh, yeah, just really quickly, I love how pathetic Bammy looks when he doesn't have, like, his armor is completely dropped when he doesn't have his suit and his hat, and like, I don't want to say vulnerability, but there's like this, he's playing pretend at this point.
Yeah, he's been literally disrobed, and he probably knows that other people saw who took his beer, but is he really going to push it? So he looks like a fool. He knows it. He knows others know it. So he's definitely being minimized in this moment.
Stop. Andrea, unmute yourself.
Hi, I just thought it was interesting that we see the doorman come in because again, there's a change in energy and he now is not really needed at the door, but the situation is kind of a transformative sort of energy, but it's also very volatile in the dance. And it's time for him to be in the room.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that could very well be why he comes in the room. We'll see how the scene plays out, and particularly what the music is about. Maybe I don't know, we'll revisit that. But I like that. Thank you,
Joshua. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I love how volatile, Andrew, that's a great word, volatile. I love how volatile the camera work is suddenly becoming in this scene. Like, even though it's a very moving camera throughout, it's steadier, and it really captures the rhythm of that dance, particularly if you've been to a party like this where the people using their minds, at the end, yeah, it's just, yeah.
it's an end of night energy, isn't it? Kind of get the sense, just this is those who don't want to go home, may never go home, maybe the overserved. And yeah, the camera work, we should talk about some of the filmmaking distinctions here. It's not a lolling camera anymore. As you said, Joshua, it's a jostled one. There's a lot of low angle shots. Instead of being right at the level of the dancers, we're kind of looking up at these men who are towering over us. And there's also a change in the editing scheme too. Instead of these long takes where we just kind of rest in the moment, they're quick cuts to successive images of really frantic motion. Again, another example of how this is one long night in one place, but each sequence is given its own energy by the filmmaking.
Carrie, go ahead.
We went from Clifton and his kind of aggressive, inappropriate dancing to him being invited into the community. Move off to the short scene of Cynthia and this other woman, and then the music is gone. And then the needle slowly drops into a new sound with this high-pitched whistle, and then a much more aggressive style of dancing, very testosterone fueled. You see mostly men out on the floor, and it's like, okay, they've absorbed Clifton. Now Clifton has kind of bled something into the energy of the room.
Yeah, could be.
Gloria, go ahead.
I'm also thinking the party's been going on for a while, and they're probably getting more stoned as the night's going on.
Well, and this is what I was suggesting is we'll see this becomes a moment of Rastafarianism, which we've seen touches of that here and there in different characters. And Clifton definitely, when he got the mic, is speaking towards that. So we're beginning to see sort of the Jamaican or religious roots of some of this music. And this is where the men who are singing this, we'll see as the scene goes on, they kind of coalesce around that idea, which is a different energy.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, it's almost funny the way they introduce this with a shot of the wall as well. Instead of it sweating as it does before, it doesn't do quite the same thing and is introducing a totally different male vibe now instead of the male-female vibe.
With even the shot of the hands, banging on the wall when they hear and recognize what the song that's about to come. Maybe this was, this was the routine way of ending one of these blues parties, perhaps. That could be as well. And so it's kind of signaling the evening is going to officially shift into this new movement.
Stop. So you noticed on that, the last person who was focused in on, it's a worship dance in a way.
And that's a character, I don't have his name or the actor, but we saw him in the backyard. And I believe he was saying something about Jah, and we got a hint of, the element of a Rastafarianism going on at this party. So he's returned. This is like the moment he's been waiting for.
Scott, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to point out one thing that this scene points out again is the costuming. All these men are wearing these like black and like checkered black costumes, except for our one resident villain with the red shirt.
Yeah, and it's interesting what happens here is, with most of them, rather than the women who are individually colored in different shirts for the most part, this creates one mass, one throng, which of course is how the dance is itself. And so the costuming aids in that.
Andrea, go ahead.
Sorry about that. So just at the end here, I really like all the touches of like the background of these particular people is, I guess it's also a London thing, mostly Caribbean or Jamaican, but kind of following, so this Rastafarian thing growing in the party, but when they're talking on the couch earlier and talking about the places that they came from in Jamaica, and then their families are their names, their British names are English, which is very telling, their last names. And the also when Franklin first introduced his friend, he used a term for his friend like rigging master or something. Instead of wingman, he used like a sailing term. And or at least that's what I caught. And I just love all those little bits of details of a culture that is not familiar to me.
Yeah, you could have, for those of us who are unfamiliar with it, a dictionary of the vernacular, the terms using, and include in there sucks teeth, which we touched on last night.
Joshua, go ahead.
Yeah, just I love the note. I don't know what if someone could tell me what song this is. Mercury Sound, right? I just love the notes of melancholy in the song, even though this is a very happy, uplifting, joyous thing. Because it's almost like, oh crap, this is actually going to end in a few hours. We're gonna have to go back to work, and like that the sadness of having a party end. Yeah, and I was just talking about this scene with my friend actually a few months ago. We instantly came to like this moment in our lives where we're at this big raging party in like London at drama school, and we both like it speaks to the universality of this like movie and scene.
So I think Mercury Sound is the name of the DJ group. I don't know if it's the name of a song as well. I'm going to link to, at the end of the evening, which is coming up quickly here, a Spotify playlist of songs from this film, which I've had on repeat since seeing this, and the answer might be in there. I don't know offhand.
Jeff, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, this reminds me of the silly game scene earlier, where the audience doesn't want this song to end. And in the earlier scene, they extend it by singing the song. And this one, the DJ just spins it back.
Yeah, smart of him. I don't think things would have gone well if he had stopped the party there. So, all right, I think, speaking of which, we have about 12 minutes left in this film, and we are running out of time, but I think we can do it. Let's give it.
Stop. Aaron, go ahead.
We've mentioned the level of testosterone on display and how the dancing and the camera is more aggressive at this point. I think it is important to also note it's not violent. The dynamic of the scene has changed as far as who's dancing, what's going on here. But in terms of what we're seeing, it's not, it's not a mosh pit. It's not people that are fighting each other. It's still communal. There's a release going on here, and it's in a different way because of, well, men are occupying the floor space at this point. And yes, there's probably a mix of the inebriated in various forms, so that's informing, I think, things. But I think that's best indicated by the bouncer. He's no longer concerned with why do I need to be here right now. He's more, I can enjoy myself, let alone jump into the fray, so to speak. So I do think that there's a clear distinction between violent dancing versus these people are still having their good time, just in a way that's obviously it's less provocative and more aggressive.
Yeah, he understands the energy, and you'll also notice there is at least one woman in the group, and so, which I think speaks to the communal element you're talking about. Even though it's of a very different demeanor, it's still communal. And I wonder if the bouncer, if Java was also brought, this was what I was suggesting before. He came in because he knew this music, he knew it was shifting into this evening, and is maybe Rastafari himself under that big hat, are his dreads, and maybe this is the moment of the night that he wanted to be a part of. Christopher, looks like you had a comment.
Hang on, my internet connection got a little wobbly there, but I'm back. Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, subtitles. I think I just got it. They talked about freedom. You're a free man now. Right at the end there, it seemed like there was like some sort of religious or awakening that seemed to be available to all the men there on the floor.
Right, which would tie in with Rastafarianism, right? This teaching that Black Jamaicans will have eventual redemption, return to Africa, Black people, and enjoys the ritualistic use of marijuana. So we see that here, forbids the cutting of hair, which relates to the dreads. And so that's absolutely at play in this whole last sequence.
Stop. Stop. I just love that we never see the bicycle.
It's a beautiful shot, and so astonishing in its simplicity, I think, because of the juxtaposition, right? How quickly we're brought from all the things we were just talking about, the intensity of that room, the movement, the energy, and then we get this quiet. It's the first time, I think, then maybe since 10 minutes in, there hasn't been music of some sort in the background. So it's this audio oasis. What else do people notice in the filmmaking that makes this stand out so much?
Go ahead, Aaron.
In regards to that question, daylight. We're in a completely new setting. To go along with that, I do like that the film is built to this sort of what would seem like a fever pitch, and again, in a different kind of film, there might be some kind of police break-in or whatever, and it just kind of ruins the whole moment with drama. Instead, the party presumably just happened and ended, and it was just a really great night for most people. Obviously, there were some altercations here or there, and Cece has things to talk about with people, but the movie now is just like, despite things that are coming up, which still aren't the worst things, the things that are coming up now, it's yeah, we've avoided like these cliche. We can just move on to what's next. What's next for these people? That's ideally, in a positive light, which I think the daylight also helps signify.
I think it's our first sight of daylight in the entire film, I believe. So yeah, great.
Joshua, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add too that one of the differences in filmmaking already you see is the color. It's daylight, so you think it'd be brighter colors, but it's very muted as compared to sort of the harsh lights of in that party.
But they're natural colors, right? I think that's the distinction. Is it's a natural green. It's a there's a blue sky there, and that stands apart from the hyper realistic almost greens or blues in some of the shirts and the dresses that we had been seeing. So yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I also think it's just this sense of open space that the camera is capturing. We are not in that cramped room anymore. Now it was a welcoming cramped room. It was the center bubble as we've been talking about. But this it's like you can breathe. You can see the air is fresh. And it's an unbroken take following them along on the bike here. Going back to what you said, Jamie, I think that's part of the thinking behind not showing the bike is they're almost flying. They're in this open air space, almost literally, with this unbroken take that we see.
Eric, go ahead.
Now that we're paused, I thought I'd point out something I thought of overnight. The guy with the cross that we're about to see, that strikes me as unusual in a movie. The guy, I'm familiar with Stations of the Cross where you carry the cross in the church, but this is just a guy going down a road with a huge cross. And there was one other movie last year with exactly the same motif, and that was Minari. Couldn't be a more different movie about a Korean family in rural Arkansas. And it also had this same theme of a guy with a large cross walking down a road.
Yeah, and in that film, the implication is that it's an act of penitence that character he mentions that this is his church. This is what he does every Sunday. Here, I think it is to keep in mind the religious background of Martha and how that is perhaps in conflict not only with her whole night, but also, of a different tradition than the Rastafarianism we were just experiencing, and how that is part of her experience and her identity is those two things within this subculture that she's a part of. So we'll get started again here and see that character with the cross return.
Stop. Go ahead, Scott.
Just really quickly, I just love the owner, his reaction to this situation, how he was pretty kind to him. Like he pulled him aside to ask him not to stay there rather than doing it in front of him. I think that's just in contrast to what I might expect in a film like this, which is waiting for somebody who's white to be mean to the black man, you know. But it wasn't that way. I thought that was a great touch.
It's probably another example of eliding the confrontation that might have been the first narrative choice. It seems that way. But at the same time, there are probably 10 microaggressions that have been thrown at Franklin by his boss. A couple of them I noticed previous watches. This one I realized even the remarks about the darkness of the room could be read as a racist taunt that he knows Franklin can't return because of the position he's in. So yeah, the tension in this scene working at so many different levels.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Speaking as a black person on this panel here, not to Scott, what you're saying, you're not wrong as far as there are worse ways to have seen that scene play out. Yeah, I can put it that way. But in terms of what Josh, you just remarked upon, yeah, there are a number of reasons that scene's very uncomfortable. Could it have gone worse? Sure. Were there still a lot of difficult sections to kind of weave by there, especially on Franklin's part, and even Martha for that matter, as far as having to be in a situation that could turn sour for her. Yes, it's great that nothing further happened, but there's a lot of uncomfortableness there that I certainly recognize.
I did like another gesture that's in that moment is the second Franklin gives to Martha, where he stands directly in front of her to say, "I'll be with you in a moment." And it's recognizing, I think, exactly what you were just talking about, and giving her seeing her and saying, my boss may be demeaning us in ways we both can feel, but I'm going to recognize you here and not completely negate you. I just think that on the part of Michael Wood, the actor, is a great little gesture.
Scott, go ahead.
Okay, well, I appreciate that point taken. I guess just to reiterate, I was just pointing out that it could have been so much. I expected it to be so much different than what it was, and so that's why I noted that. Anyway,
Joshua, your comment?
Yeah, just really quick. I mean, like, yeah, it is, I guess, kind. But they've left the safety of this party, and suddenly, things like whiteness and by the word white supremacy, sort of intervene and come down on that sort of the safety that they had previously, and also in a way sort of like explains sort of changing color palette as well.
So this is where the bubble completely pops, right? They were maybe able to carry it with them out of the party on the bike in the ways we talked about those moments. But yeah, as soon as that boss comes into the garage, it all goes away.
Can I just say that while they're no longer flying at this point, and this is a great freeze frame, their feet are solidly on the ground and they are solidly together. So that little altercation just brought them closer. Stop. Joshua?
Yeah, just like just quickly, like when the first time I saw it, this was my favorite scene, and it's just because it brought me back to that feeling of leaving at like a party early in the morning, the morning after at 8 in the morning. And for me, obviously living in London, riding the red bus home, and it still brings tears to my eyes, and I just love the way that film, you feel the sensation of that character and the excitement of leaving that party and having that great night.
Andrea?
Well, again, a moment where a white character seems to be kind. I'm just wondering if I'm reading the whole thing right. Kind-ish. The conductor says seats up top, love. And I'm wondering if that's just because there's no more seats left below, or if there's any kind of restriction about where she can sit. Probably not, since it's the 1980s, but not knowing London.
Right, and it's one of the London double-decker buses, so I'm fairly certain that wouldn't be the case, but I don't know what the implication of love is, if it's a generally accepted kind term, or if it's clearly when his boss in the shop calls him boy, there's a meaning behind that. So,
Daniel, we'll get to you in a minute, but I think Gloria may have the answer. Gloria, go ahead.
Everybody says love to everybody. It's not a term of endearment. It's just a way of addressing someone politely, neutrally. As he says that, it really struck me as very beautiful, because there's no racism in it whatsoever, compared to what was felt certainly by the boss and possibly by the 4 white boys when she comes out of the party, when they are going towards her. So as someone who's lived here 30 years, I would say it's totally neutral.
Okay, Daniel.
Yeah, 2 things. One is the fact that they make the boss a physically small and weaker looking guy, and his politeness comes off as this sort of treacly obscenity of sorts. Maybe that's too strong a word, but it's like there's no question that he is the boss and that this is the way things are. And so it goes beyond an issue of, is there going to be a fight or there's going to be some. No, this is the way the situation is. And I think by making him this physically less imposing character makes that very clear. As to the rest of the scene, we're starting the bookend of the ending and mirroring the beginning of it. So here we have a bus, and then we hear the train already, mirroring the beginning of it.
I'll just note real quick, we are over time, and I don't care.
well, now if we were all in Mackey on campus, we would get to stand up and applaud this amazing film. But as it is, I guess we have to use our lame Zoom reactions or something like that. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to pause it there. And since Jamie has given us permission to not panic that we're a little over time, maybe we can spend a minute or two for some final observations or comments or questions that any of you have. I've really appreciated all your participation so far. I think this has been a great conversation in the midst of the film. But yeah, let's take a few moments here before we wrap things up to have some more conversation. Jamie, did you
Okay.
want to give us some more instruction?
Yeah, Anthony, just go ahead. We'll just go into this and then I'll close it out as soon as you feel like we are finished.
Sure. One of the things that stood out to me this time when I was watching it was Martha, how she, at one point, she says that she was born here. And several times I hear her accent come in and out. And so she's second generation. She was born in London. That was very interesting to me this time.
And something she clearly wanted to communicate. Again, you know, the different social stratas that are at play at this one party. When she first meets Franklin, she wanted, and I think he calls her a country girl or asks if she's a country girl. She wanted to make that clear distinction.
Let's see, Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I'm missing something that maybe you guys can help me with. The Christianity versus Rastafarianism. That seems to be a class distinction as well as a religious construct here that's been pervasive throughout this whole thing, right? Like is the setup here that she's upper class and she was hanging out with this different class of people through the whole movie, and then now she's back?
That's really interesting. I don't have the background to say whether it would also be a class distinction in addition to the differing belief systems, but I think it's fascinating. And throughout Small Acts, you will see that many of the families we meet in this Caribbean community are part of a Christian faith tradition as well. And so certainly there were probably some points of conflict. I would imagine you had some families where some were part of one tradition and others are part of another, perhaps. But it's another example of the different social stratas at play here at this one party, I think.
Okay, Andrea.
Well, there's some dialogue at the beginning of the party where Cece is dissing Martha, or feels like Martha is acting more proud or something, standoffish. She accuses her of that. So maybe there is a little bit of that, but also I thought that was a very nice house and that they were throwing a birthday party for Cece that was pretty lavish in a way. So even though it looked like they had prices for the food around the kitchen, so people were helping, to pay for the party by paying for that stuff. Anyway, yeah, it's hard. I don't know if anyone has a better read on if that was a major difference between the two families, where Martha kind of came from and where Cece was living.
Yeah, that mini rivalry between Martha and Cece is definitely something we were kind of tracing, and you don't get explicitly what that might have been about.
Aaron, go ahead and unmute yourself.
It's not exactly Valley Girl as far as the disparate situations between the two characters, but I think the greater thing is that the party serves as a unifier for the most part. There's obviously people from all kinds of places coming to this thing, but ideally, you have people that are all there to have this kind of that communal sense once again. And for the most part, despite some things that happened, it is shared. And that's on that point. As far as we just watched this wonderful ending goes, and I just want to point out how just like I believe, was it Josh? I believe you pointed out the kind of the cyclical nature, maybe someone else. But I thought that was really, really great to see just how it does all come together again, as far as reverting back on itself and showing us, bringing us back to where we started. But just that final touch, just get into bed and then wake up right again, got to go to church. Like, it's just a great button on the whole film. Also, she had a Paddington book in her room. Yeah. Another great unifier.
I missed that. Nice catch. Yeah, very nice.
Joshua, your final thought?
Yeah, just that I think through the format that you chose, or that we were doing, you really see just mini stories going on in the movie when you get to pause it and discuss it. And just also, again, we sort of said how specific this movie is, and yet how universal it is. You know, it just brings up so many memories in me, experiences in me. And so, I mean, it's truly powerful. Also, I just want a quick dig that definitely a lot of Rocky in this movie. I have to get a quick dig at Larson every time I see him. But.
little film spotting inside baseball there. But yeah, the nature of Interruptus is to do exactly what you're describing, Joshua, is really to start to kind of see movies from all these different angles. I'm going to make a plug for next year's Interruptus, but I think we have one final comment from Ross, I believe.
Yeah, Ross, go ahead, and we'll get Mitchell in as well.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, why do you think there
Did
we go.
Did we lose Ross?
No, I'm here. I guess I was going to ask, why do you think this was the second episode of kind of in between Mangrove and Red, White, and Blue? It seems like such an interesting placement for it, kind of within this series.
Yeah, I can just speak to, how it worked for me. Mangrove is an incredibly intense and rough experience, documenting police brutality, police oppression, turning into a court case where protesters were attacked by police and then arrested for inciting a riot. And then we have to sit through that court case. So it is a wrenching episode. And for me, it kind of balances things back to the joy a little bit, even though there's a lot of seriousness going on here, as we've discussed. It makes us realize this is not just an oppressed community, but this is a rich, joyous, beautiful community as well. And I think for me, is very important to balance those things before moving on to the rest of the anthology.
All right, Mitchell, you get to make the last comment.
All right, hope I don't blow it with a bad one here. I think I just wanted to follow up on something that I think Youngerman just kind of brought up, the universal quality of it. And as a white person, this movie is a window into a different community that I wasn't familiar with and obviously can't have the experience of in my own life. But there is a kind of universal quality to so much of it. Something that comes to mind for me every time I watch it is the fact that in most movies, party scenes or movies that are about parties the whole time, they're not super realistic, to at least my experience of being at parties, which usually comes into play with like just cinematic structure and you need like narratives to follow you through. But this movie just feels so much like a party that I've actually been to, right? In the way that we follow those kind of loose character threads without an overlying like straight A to B narrative the whole way through.
Definitely an advantage of this narrative approach and the ensemble approach as well. Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you to everyone who participated. Really enjoyed watching this alongside all of you. And before I hand it off to Jamie, or maybe I'll do this as he is giving us some final notes here, but I'm going to share a couple of things in the chat, a couple of links. For the British Film Institute, Ashley Clark put together recently a roundup 10 great Black British films. So I'm going to put that in the chat. I will also put in the chat that Spotify playlist based on the movie that I've been enjoying, so you can check that out. But yeah, thank you to Jamie for being our moderator. Thank you to Cooper for making this all work, because it did. And that is pretty amazing in this day of Zoom. So really appreciate both of your help. And just thanks in general to the Conference on World Affairs for continuing this tradition of Roger Ebert's, this great tradition, allowing me to be a part of it. I hope to see as many of you as possible next year in Boulder for 2022. If this was your first experience of Ebert Interruptus, doing it virtually, maybe we have given you the push to make the trip. It's just one of dozens, maybe 100 things going on at the conference. Fantastic panels, a jazz concert, movie screenings. So much is going on. We're just one part of it. So if you enjoyed this and want to do it again, I'm not sure, maybe Jamie has the dates if they've announced those, but we'll let you know. It'll be about a year from now. Come on out. Boulder's beautiful in April, and we'll do this all together. I'm pretty confident. I'm going to say we're going to do this all together next year in person. So thank you again, Jamie. I'm giving it back to you, and I'm going to drop those links in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks very much, Josh. I'm going to talk for about 30 seconds, so that should give everybody time to grab those links before this all goes away. We don't have the dates set for next year, but keep an eye on your mailbox or on the CWA website for other CWA events that happen all year. Every month or two, there's something. So thank you for joining us for the final 2021 Ebert Interruptus session. Special thank you, of course, to Josh Larson for hosting. And if you'd like to support Josh and learn more about his work, you can find his book, podcast, and social media accounts linked on the CWA website, or just do a search. I'd also like to thank Cooper for providing technical expertise and helping this all work smoothly, the entire film committee for all their hard work over the year, along with the program committee and the entire CWA office staff. And a big thanks to all our fellow Ebert Interruptus fans for your support. Please consider making a gift to the CWA, which can also be done on the CWA website, www.colorado.edu/CWA. My name is Jamie Kreutz, and as CWA Film Chair, and on behalf of the conference